Well, viewers, the top news, of course, coming out of that is that there has been no monumental announcement in tune really with what was to be expected from the finance minister in a simple vote on account. Yes, there have been a lot of promises that have been made to various sections of the society, but fundamentally, if the middle class was expecting tax breaks, if corporate India was expecting tax breaks, that hasn't quite happened. Also, of course, the one headline that's probably going to stir the markets and perhaps already has is that the economy is on fiscal glide path, which is fundamentally important to those who are looking at the health of the economy. At least that's what we are being told. Let me bring you in on this, Gaurav. Let me just bring you in on some of the points that perhaps you will take away from this. But let me tell you, before we move to our experts, very, very quickly, viewers, it has been a very workmanlike focus by Nirmala Sitharaman on charting out what is really going to be a disciplined approach to expenditure, keeping within very narrow limits and benchmarks that the government had set for itself. Revenues have exceeded expectations. Large number of important provisos been made to keep continuity as the basis really for moving forward, but fundamentally no big bang announcements coming through. So if there was an expectation that there would be a huge splurge before the elections, that hasn't quite happened, and that was perhaps expected in line really with some of the other budgets that have been put out there by the Modi government. People were expecting, of course, greater increase corrected to inflation in certain heads of direct benefit transfers to farmers, etc. That hasn't quite also happened. The Prime Minister had made it quite clear that this would be a vote on account. It perhaps tells you that the government is quite confident of its electoral prospects going forward. It did not want to risk any of the hard work, the legacy that they have really built up in trying to sort of put together what has been a fundamentally disciplined outlook to expenditure. So that is something that it's quite clear that the government didn't want to sort of squander, and therefore we have seen the government sticking very, very closely to some of its own expectations of itself, especially when it comes to fiscal consolidation. Let me just walk you through some of the points that, of course, have been made by Nirmala Sitharaman in that budget. She's talked about coming back, increasing the ease of living, enhancing India's energy security, mass transport augmentation, middle class, especially the younger middle class, a housing plan for the middle class which is going to be sort of unrolled, a capex outlet hiked by 11%, which is a fundamental headline, women emancipation, especially focusing on women health, a large number of announcements under that, 50-year interest-free loans for the private sector is something that will enthuse a large number of those who are looking to start up companies, etc. Free ration for 80 crore Indians and 517 new routes to enable passenger travel. So that is something that the government has put out there, apart from, of course, focusing on some of its achievements. The first half, the first 25 minutes of the speech focused on how the government has actually come out there and improved ease of living and, of course, the top line numbers of the government. Let's go across and get some reactions from the CI. R. Dinesh is there with us. Mr. Dinesh, how do you see the government, vote on account?
Start. So, the immediate reaction Thank you for joining us today. The immediate reaction would be that the consolidation of the fiscal deficit, and I think our recommendation initially was 5.4%, but it's a 5.1% is obviously a very significant step forward. But at the same time, not sacrificing the focus on growth, so the capex spend has increased by almost 11.1%, which is also very good. So the continued focus on infrastructure growth takes place. The third aspect, which is very important, is the focus on the rural sector and also the four aspects of women, the farmer and the poor being taken care of. The continuation of the housing, both for women as well as for the rural sectors, are all very welcome. So this takes care of the equitable growth approach of the government. And we have to wait and see regarding the direct tax and indirect tax proposals. As the finance minister has said, that will be taken up only in the final budget. So therefore, this budget does not cover that. So as far as we are concerned, it's a very positive step forward with regard to having the headroom available for growth, considering the fiscal deficit and also the focus on equitable growth. From an industry perspective, obviously we will wait for the main budget to come to look at that details. Thank you.
Well, a short statement there from the CII. But as I was telling you, viewers, the focus really is on reassuring India that fiscal consolidation, the glide path to those fiscal numbers is very much in place, and that has seen already the market reacting extremely positively. So very, very important, because there was always this apprehension that in an election year there would be this lurch towards splurging, to be putting out schemes, etc., that would break the bank, so to speak, and send our glide path towards fiscal consolidation haywire. But that has not happened. It tells you that the government is quite, at this moment, secure in its own political and electoral prospects, which is a very important signal that has come out from the Modi government, because fundamentally it has eschewed any real populism. Infra growth, the capex expenditure has been hiked by 11%. Continued focus on infra. There has been visible changes in and around us. When we look at roadways, etc., those that were expecting tax breaks come away disappointed. We continue with the same tax slabs for both direct and indirect taxes, personal and corporate. So no changes there, which was to be perhaps expected. As I had said in the very beginning, viewers, that a government conscious of its legacy, which has been a disciplined one, would not really go there and break the bank, and that has not happened. Rural sector getting a lot of attention in this budget, so did women. And let's try to get some initial assessments. First from you, Mr. Chikkarmani. What do you make of Nirmala Sitharaman's vote on account budget?
It is as predicted. Earlier I had written, and in the morning we had discussed also on this, that she will continue to keep fiscal consolidation in mind. She'll keep it going. There will be no new tax policies or any kind of rebates, etc. coming, and she has done exactly that. This was a vote on account, and a vote on account is what she has delivered. I had also forecasted that she would talk about the past 10 years and give a vision for the next, for the future. She did that, though I feel it wasn't adequate. I had expected her to speak far more on the vision, on the way forward, on the celebrations of the past. She has refrained from doing so, and maybe that's...
Why do you think? Why do you think? Because this was a great opportunity to talk up her 10 years, with 7 years, so as she's concerned as finance minister, and her record, and of course 3 years prior to that.
Yeah. So I don't know why this understated, subdued, it is very unlike this government, which takes the smallest of all points and makes a big deal out of it, or at least talks about it. It's a government that communicates. At every level. In this budget, there was communication on the big issues, but I think she didn't go down the way I had expected, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I would have thought that in the run-up to the elections, And this is one major policy space where you get to say what you want to say, at least on the economic policy front. Maybe why she has held back, to answer your question, I don't know.
Maybe it's a signal that the government is quite confident that the people appreciate the work that it is doing, and therefore it doesn't really need to go out there and publicize much beyond. Perhaps that's one of the reasons. Anand Narasimhan also here with us. Let me just very quickly come to you, Soundararajan. What do you make of today's speech?
Look, I think it was exactly what it was supposed to be, which is a vote on account. So if you see, there was a constant reference to what was happening for the 10 years and a lot of remarks on the side about the previous, the 10 years back up to 2014, the economic mess that there was and what this government and these the 10 years have done. But and I don't think, quite frankly, that there would have been any big budget announcements now. But there was a lot of, she did allude to preparing a more, in terms of a framework, in terms of a vision, very confidently saying that when we come in July and present the budget, we'll give you a very detailed plan, which means they already know.
Well, the glide path to 5.1%, do you think that's realistic, that number?
I think it's a good aspiration. And I think given what it is and given they have been generally fiscally prudent, yes. And for the first time, though, it's not dependent on disinvestment, which I think is great, because usually your fiscal targets have been largely dependent on disinvestment. So I need to look at the budget details, the documents, to see whether there's a disinvestment target, because it's been a mess, quite frankly.
I don't think there was, I may not have heard, but I didn't think that there was anything explicit.
My point, exactly, that the fiscal targets, whatever they've said, the fiscal deficit targets, has not been actually based on that. The other variable that I would be very interested in looking at, even though she said that your income tax collections have gone up and the number of income tax payers have gone up. If you look at the last 2 or 3 budgets, you will see that the revenue deficit's actually been dropping. There's been a problem there. So I would be very curious to see how that aligns now in terms of numbers with the increases that are here, but whether the revenue deficit has actually changed.
Anand?
Well, we got Hemal and Gulzar here, so let's say namaste and Jai Hind to everybody here in the studio. The fact is that she's not done anything superlative. Yeah. There's no headline. For us news buffs, it's quite dull, isn't it? But from the industry point of view, she stayed the path. The government is saying we are going to continue to do what we are doing and we are on track. Now my question is, when will private sector start also oiling the wheels?
No, so one thing is, honestly, from the news, yes. From an industry perspective, no news is good news in a way. From an industry, it gives a feeling of stability and continuity. So to that extent, I think it is good. And as a vote on account, we didn't expect anything major. Yeah. But what we did expect, I would personally expect 2 things, out of which one has happened, i.e. things which were expiring, she did mention, are extending. We will look at the fine print, i.e. the manufacturing company incentives and all. Though frankly, my take on that is that you cannot keep on extending it by 1 year each. If you look at last year, you extend 1 year.
Correct.
For a private sector, you don't decide for 1 year. If you are setting up a plant, you will need at least 2 to 3 years horizon.
Correct.
So that would be one, which is extending. The other was the simplification process. So on whether it's on the personal taxation or on the corporate side, for example, there was a want of TDS provisions to be simplified.
Yes.
I thought that would be something that could have been done even on a vote of account. So that's an area where I would have expected some things to come in, which has not. We'll look at the fine print.
Well, from a government perspective, are they very clear on the fact that we've done what we had to do? This is perhaps a report card, and the confidence that the Prime Minister exuded, saying the rest we'll do once we are back in government. Now, you think that sense will continue? The stock markets so far are up, they are not down.
So I think if you see, first of all, let's talk about some figures, right? They talked about increase in tax collections year on year.
Right.
So this time the estimate is around 26 lakh crore will come from tax collections against 23 lakh crore last year. So you see constant increase in tax collections. That's an indication of, increasing the tax base as well as improvement of compliance, right? So that's one key aspect I wanted to highlight. No change in any tax rate. Today, I'm sure, they did not make any announcement about it, but 2 days ago, government has already made some announcement and issued some concessions on customs duty for mobile phone manufacturing industry.
Correct.
which were effective from 30th January. So that is something that they had planned to sort of increase the value addition for the manufacturing activities in India. But today's focus was specifically to talk about how GST has increased the tax base, how successful it was. They mentioned the report of Deloitte as well, saying that 94% companies feel that it was a largely a positive move, and the tax base increased twice. So I think these are the key indicators that the government has actually talked about, rather than saying that what they are going to do in today's budget. So as expected, not too many reforms, not too many changes, but still directionally they have given some sort of indication on growing economy, growing tax base and increasing tax revenues.
So growing economy, growing tax base, the GST numbers the last month, Gautam Chikarmane, is about 1.72 lakh crores, and she said that we have averaged about 1.64 lakh crore month on month. So that is a significant number compared to when people said nobody is going to pay GST and you are not going to get any revenue at all. But is this an indicator that the private sector is biting the bait? Is it? Are we going to see?
I don't think
that,
you have any
or
option.
they'll say, "Ab May ke baad dekhte hain."
I don't think there is any option. I think if there is a tax system in place, private sector has to bite into it. And I find that instead of managing 17 kinds of taxes, indirect taxes, now if there is only one kind of a bureaucracy that the corporate sector has to engage with, it's definitely a better system. And you can see the numbers are growing. I see them moving towards 2 lakh crore per month very soon.
Let me ask you this. Have they done enough to not do anything in this vote on account budget? The government?
No.
A vote on account, I think these are speculations for the July budget. This a vote on account by its very definition is restrictive in its expression. But I think the next budget in July, in July, that's where a lot of debate, etc. would happen. By the way, did you, everybody seems to have missed it, or maybe I'm the only one who noticed it, the geopolitics in the budget. Did you hear the stress on Lakshadweep?
Yes.
And I think these are the subtle messaging, because the world is now watching India's budgets, and perhaps that was one subtle message.
See, from on an everyday point of view, you would see most of the flights are full. Yes. Most of the connectivity is increased. Budget airlines are charging more than full service airlines, and they're still going full. Trains are going full. Connectivity has increased across the board. So somewhere somebody is making money. You have to accept that somewhere somebody is making money. Is that reflecting in the health of the economy?
It is. In fact, if you see, Gulzar also shared some numbers in terms of the direct tax. And remember, the collection in the fiscal deficit of 1.1, the direct tax collections increases at modest of 10 or 11%, as compared to the current, which is around 15%. So in a way, to my side, it shows that it is increasing. Both the GST collections are increasing, your even direct tax collections are increasing, and increasing at a better rate than the inflation. So to my mind, that is a good sign that we are getting into more growth oriented and also more organized one. But to answer your earlier question, I felt, as you said, that there could have been something on the simplification part which could have been kind of also covered in this vote of account.
Could they have done that, Nirupama ji? Could they have announced something around simplification? Or do you think that the government today believes we have done enough in the last 4.5-5 years to not do anything superlative, or to try and give any fodder for anybody to say, oh, they are doing this because they are worried about what will happen in Lok Sabha 2024?
I think it is exactly that. See, because quite frankly, I think I don't think they thought the need to do anything now. Clarifications, yes, but if you see, there were some interesting points. Lakshadweep aside, which I also did pick up on, very subtle. As I said, the constant comparison, including the commissioning of a white paper to compare what this 10 years has been to the previous 10 years, which I think is telling as well. But that comparison is important. The constant reiteration saying we inherited a mess and we've now got you out of the mess. That. But also in terms of what they're allocating as long-term interest-free loans for states. Correct. Whether it's for tourism, whether it's for innovation, whether it's for, I think in certain other sectors, I think that's also good, because they are saying that we're giving states a lot of leeway.
Yeah, they're saying infrastructure building. Anything that is going to do build infrastructure, manufacturing or services, which is going to amplify, and there is going to have perhaps a ripple down effect across other states and other. We are ready to give you long-term interest-free loans. They're saying.
Not just, I think in some sense, it's good to be very neutral and say this is what we've done, as in taking a stock of where you are, what you have done so far, because then with a clear indication saying when we come back in July and when we present the budget in July, which is anyway a very positive way of saying we will do more.
Right. Let's ask this question of the industry. Let's go across to Shivani, who's there with members of the CII and FICCI, and ask them. The government is going to continue to spend and they're going to keep one track going. When is the private sector going to get hyperactive?